Hi and welcome back to my channel, Quest for Faith with Brian. Here in this channel, we break down the Catholic faith from a newcomer's perspective. So today's topic, I don't know if many of y'all have noticed this. I've said it a few times, I think, but I'm a big history buff. And so I love reading history. And one of the things that I've recently learned about is Catholicism in colonial America and how Catholics were treated. And so I think this actually has repercussions on what's happening today, that I've noticed the difference between Protestants and Catholics from being a convert. So we're going to dive into that today. So before we get started though, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for all those that have been subscribing. My channel's kind of going through a growth spurt right now, and I just can't believe that so many of you guys enjoy watching my videos. It really does keep me motivated. So, but without further ado, let's dive into the topic. One of my favorite periods of history to study has always been the American Revolution. Just the heroism that happened during that, the birth of our nation, all of this stuff just has always just grabbed my imagination. And I've read, I don't know how many books on it, fiction, or biographical, whatever, right? Fiction and nonfiction books of this era. And but one of the things that I never realized was how poorly Catholics were treated during this period of time. Now, we all know kind of, I think it's general knowledge how badly Catholics are treated in Protestant countries once the Reformation kicked off, especially in England when the Cromwell government came to be, and just all the massacres, how Henry VIII took away all of the land from the Catholic Church and basically kind of pretty much devastated their economy, because the backbone of the English economy was run by the Catholic Church and all the monasteries and things that are going on there. So I knew about all that, but I didn't realize the depth of hatred and vitriol that Catholics were treated in the United States, in the Americas, when it was colonies. So let's kind of dive into some of that, because I think some of y'all might be surprised at this. So one of the main colonies, Virginia, that, I don't know, I didn't know this. This is crazy. So there was a Saint Father Plunkett, and this man's story is amazing. He died in 1697. And he was obviously a Catholic priest, but Catholicism was outlawed in the colony of Virginia. And so he would secretly go to homes of Catholics and perform the sacraments. He even converted a number of Protestants to Catholicism, and he just constantly just worked and worked and worked, and just stayed ahead of the law, basically, for a number of years, until finally they caught him, and they brutally beat him. They starved him out, and they wanted him to convert to become a Calvinist. And after months of beating him and starving him, they realized that this good father was not going to convert, and they put him on an island off the coast that no one lived on, and was left to die. And he died there in 1697. But what were the laws? So this is some craziness, and this kind of maps out through all the colonies. So in Virginia, the anti-Catholic laws there, if you heard mass, you were fined $100, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But if you put that in today's terms of money, that was $5,000 that you were fined. If you did not attend an Anglican service for 1 month, you were fined $20, or in today's money, $1,000. 2 months of not attending, it was $40 or $2,000. 3 months of not attending was $60, or in today's terms, $3,000. So it just kept escalating. Now, if you were a Protestant that converted to Catholicism, that was considered high treason, and the penalty was death. If you were a priest, especially a Jesuit priest, because back then the Jesuits were the ones that were setting up all the missions across most of the Americas, you were put to death if you were caught. Catholics could not hold public office. They couldn't write wills. They couldn't be guardians of children. And so I'm assuming that means if, say, you were a godparent and your friends died, you couldn't take on guardianship of their children. You couldn't be lawyers. You couldn't be doctors or pharmacists. So essentially, if, say, you were charged with any of these things, you couldn't be represented by another Catholic. You were going to be represented by a Protestant in the court of law there. And these were pretty common type laws throughout the colonies in the 16 and 1700s. This wasn't unusual. The one colony that had an exception for a while was the colony of Maryland. And in Maryland was founded by George Calvert. He was friends with the king at the time, and so he wanted a colony for a safe haven for Catholics. So Maryland was named after Mary. And so at first it was great. Catholics were coming in, a few Protestants were coming in, but eventually more and more Protestants came in, and they took over the government and outlawed Catholicism in the colony of Maryland. And with similar laws about not holding office and all that kind of stuff. And that happened for a period of time. But some of the most brutal, so I'm in South Carolina. And so this shocked me. The governor of the Carolinas, so back then, this was in 1702 when this happened, but the governor of Carolina at the time was Governor James Moore. And Florida so the colony of Carolina was made up of North and South Carolina and Georgia. And the Florida was Spanish territory, and there was a war between the English and the Spanish at this point in time. And so Moore decided to take 1,000 men and march on St. Augustine Fort. And during that time, he couldn't take it, and so he went back home with his men. And 2 years later, he decided to try again. But this time, instead of going to the fort, he decided to attack the Apache Indians, who had all been converted to Catholicism. And so to kind of paint this picture of what Florida was like and how it was drastically different than the English colonies, and this is the case for most Spanish colonies. Yes, there was definitely some fighting when the Spanish first arrived, but after things settled down, the Spaniards, really their mission was conversion. And so it was the Catholic priests and the Jesuits that would set up missions all across Spanish territories. And they really kind of developed societies in most of these colonies where they were educating the Indians and converting them to Catholicism. And that was their goal. And at this point in time in the 1700s, it was really kind of a harmonious relationship that the Spaniards had with the Indians because they came there to convert. They didn't come there to conquer like we've kind of been told now, how history has been rewritten. But so Moore goes to attack these Apache Indians. And when the word comes to this is up in the Panhandle where he went, when word comes to the Spaniards, they quickly gather as many people as they can, and mostly Indians, and go with three priests, and they try and go and fight off Moore and his men, and they were eventually defeated. And Moore had all three priests executed. One was beheaded, and one was burnt to death so badly that it says in the records that his crucifix around his chest was melted into his chest. And the survivors of this atrocity that happened, they said when they showed up there, they just saw bodies everywhere, women, children, men, just slain all over the place. And one of the accounts says that during the cruel and barbarous martyrdom which the poor Apache Indians experienced, there were some of them who encouraged the others, declaring that through their martyrdom, they would appear before God. And to the pagans, they said, "Make more fire so that our hearts may be allowed to suffer for our souls. We go to enjoy God as Christians." That is crazy. And I just hope that I have that faith to be able to say that. And then kind of jumping forward just a little bit, not too much, but 1763, dyslexia kicking in. When Quebec was given to the English, King George at the time allowed the Catholics to practice their faith openly up in Quebec. And it was more of, they were allowed to live as Catholics up there. And this really made a lot of the other colonies mad, especially the New England colonies. And that was kind of one of the catechist, y'all, it's late, to invade Quebec and to invade Canada because there was Catholics up there. That wasn't the main reason, but that was one of the reasons and propagandas that they would write about these horrid Catholics that are up there, and we need to go conquer them. And so you have all these examples of how the Catholics were treated during the colonial times. And this is the founding of our nation, right? Like, this is when things are laid down. And even our founding fathers were not fans of Catholics. And a lot of this information I'm getting is from this book, The Puritan Empire. Definitely recommend reading it if you're a history person. But it's basically the history of Catholicism in the Americas is what it is. And one of the things that he has a few quotes in here from, let me get to it, sorry. He has a few quotes in here from Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. And it's just kind of shocking what these men believed about Catholics. Now, we all kind of know Benjamin Franklin didn't really believe in anything. All these guys were Masons. Franklin donated money to all faiths. And so I'm not going to dive into Franklin too much, but this is kind of interesting. So this is a letter Jefferson wrote to Miss Harrison Smith. On my opinion is that this is in 1816. So this is after his presidency. My opinion is that there would never have been an infidel if there had never been a priest. The artificial structures they have built on the purest of all moral systems, for the purpose of deriving from the penance and powerful, revolt those who think for themselves, who read in the system only that what they are. So that's not that strong of a statement, but he's basically saying if it wasn't for priests, we'd have a lot better of a world. But then we read down here, one of the things that he believed, so he was not only a Mason, right, a Freemason, but he was also a Unitarian. So that means they didn't believe in the divinity of Christ. Christ was just a man to them. But he writes this: I rejoice, and this is in 1822. I rejoice that in the blessed country of free inquiry and belief, which has surrendered its creed and is not concise to neither king nor priest, the genuine doctrine of only one God is reviving, and I trust that there is not a young man now living in the United States who will not die a Unitarian. So his hope was that everyone would reject Christ. Adams had some even harsher words, and this is in 1814. If the Christian religion, as I understand it, and this is John Adams, our second president, if the Christian religion, as I understand it, or as you understand it, and he's writing to Jefferson, should remain its ground, as I believe it will, let Platonic, pathologic, and Hindu and cannibalistic Christianity, which is the Catholic Christianity, and which has prevailed for 1,500 years, has received a mortal wound, which the monster must finally die. And so their belief really kind of boils down to having a free nation with no Christian beliefs, right? Like there's no set religion where everyone can choose what they want, which is great to have freedom of religion and be able to practice your faith. But they believe that because of that, it would destroy Christianity and the Catholic Church. That's crazy. And so looking at that, what made me click is one of the things that I've said a few times on this channel is that I've noticed that Catholics are not as evangelical as Protestants are, right? We kind of hold back talking about our faith in our church. And I think this has been beaten into us from the beginning, right? We had all of this animosity towards us where we were being killed, fined, outlawed our faith in the beginning of founding of our country, to our founding fathers hated the Catholic Church, to we started gaining momentum mainly because of immigration, and finally when we started kind of coming out of our shell in the 1950s and 60s, especially with JFK being elected, then we have Vatican II, and we see this collapse happening. And I'm not going to go into the whole Vatican II thing. But then the wind gets completely taken out of our sails when we talk about the sex scandals that we saw from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. That we kind of just quiet down. Yeah, we're Catholic. We practice our faith. It's everyone's own thing. But I think we need to be like Father Pluckett. I think we need to change that, where we are looking more to speak freely about our faith and the fullness of Christ that we find in the church, and not let this history define how we interact with the world. And we need to be more vocal and put Christ first and the Great Commission, right? That's what we are called to do. So I hope this video was interesting for you guys. This stuff kind of blew my mind learning this, because I didn't know this about early Catholicism in the United States. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like this video, share it with your friends. I'm also on Facebook now. I have a Facebook page, Quest for Faith. Go over there too. I just started it up, so I think I only have 4 or 5 people looking at it. But anyways, thank you guys very much, and I'll talk to you all later.